This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Elise Harney Real Estate and Kindred Property Care. So Thorin,
Mary,
we've got someone today that you have been holding out for probably a year now.
Yes.
And we finally have her.
We have today the one and only Janine Gordon, and I'm excited to learn about her in a different capacity, but I've always known her as a marketing and PR guru. She was the press officer for Harrods in London. She was executive vice president and head of corporate communications for Saatchi and became the president also of their public relations. And then she started her own firm. But she was finally allowed to retire because she tried for a long time, but they wouldn't let her. And so she and her husband are part-time in Florida, where she now serves on the board of trustees for the Miami City Ballet and as well as for Baptist Health. And I'm so excited to learn all about it.
She sounds dynamic, and I can't wait to meet her as well.
Here we go. Elise Harney Real Estate is the #1 real estate agency for the tri-state region, and they provide a comprehensive overview of the regional market spanning Litchfield, Dutchess, Columbia, and Berkshire counties.
Elise Harney Real Estate serves 40 unique communities with 35 years of experience. They have a team of knowledgeable real estate professionals to work with you to buy or sell your house.
Their offices are located in Salisbury, Millerton, Norfolk, Falls Village, and Riverton, or you can visit them online at www.harneyrealestate.com. Janine, thank you for coming and seeing us, and I'm so excited to have you here.
It's really a pleasure.
I've told Mary so much about you, and
Yes.
We've been excited to have you, and I'm excited to hear your take on Moxie. How would you define it?
I think Moxie is just having the guts to forge on. I would say Moxie was kind of one of the leitmotifs of my life. It all started back when I was applying to college. I decided that I wanted to go to an Ivy League school, but I didn't just want to go to an Ivy League school. I wanted to go to an Ivy League school that had a very positive ratio of men to women, like 5-1.
Yeah.
This seemed like a good choice for school. So back then in 1903, when I was when I was applying to college, they actually gave you interviews.
Oh, okay.
And so the school I decided that I had to go to was the University of Pennsylvania because they had a 5-1 ratio of men to women.
Yeah.
So I went for my interview. Very nice man.
Yeah.
And I remember he looked at my transcript and he said to me, "You know, Miss Major, you have very interesting extracurricular activities and you have very good grades in most of your subjects.
Yeah.
And you have a reasonably impressive series of scores on your achievements. But a 505 on your math SAT? I mean, don't you understand it is much harder for a woman to get in here than a man because there are so many more men than women.
Right.
What do you have to say for yourself?" And I thought for a minute and I said to myself, it's all over, so I might as well relax and enjoy myself.
Yeah.
So I leaned forward and I lowered my voice and I said, "Take me as an experiment." The guy started to laugh. I did get in.
Yeah.
My mother always said that the only reason I got into Penn was because I had the only interviewer who had a sense of humor. But I actually think, now that I am older and more experienced, that the reason he took me was he said to himself, "Boy, you know, that's creative."
Yes.
Because goodness knows she can't say, "Well, it was a bad day." So I think that's an example of Moxie. And it continued throughout my entire career. I mean, for example, my first job was training to be a buyer at Bloomingdale's. This turned out not to be a good choice for me because I don't like to go shopping.
I hear you.
I mean, you know, I'm queen of the internet. Anyway, I was assigned to the junior coats and suits department.
Okay.
Women's clothing. And my buyer made a really big mistake. He went off on a buying trip and left me in charge. Anyway, on the Friday arrived a block of copy, an ad that was going to appear on the Sunday in the New York Times. And so what I was supposed to do, of course, was read it, sign his initials, and send it back to the advertising department at Bloomingdale's.
You didn't do that, did you?
No.
No.
How well you know me. I read it, and I said to myself, wait a minute. I'm an English major.
Yeah.
I graduated from an Ivy League school. That was the one course I definitely got good grades in. So I read it very carefully. Mm-hmm. I decided it did not communicate what we of the junior coats and suits department were trying to say. Mm-hmm. And so I rewrote it to character, meaning you can only have so many letters on a line. And then I signed his name and sent it back. On the Monday, I got a call from the head of advertising. Now, mind you, I was very, very, very junior. This was my first job out of college. Anyway, the head of advertising wanted to see me. Yeah. So, I knew I was about to be commended for my insightful...
Absolutely.
So I went into her office, and I puffed out my chest like a powder pigeon, and I waited. And she said, never forget it, Miss Major, we do not tell you what to buy. Do not tell us what to write. Right. So I said to myself as I was exiting her office, you know what? I don't think this is the right career choice for me. Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed that one of the things you do with your interviews is to ask them for some lessons that they've learned in their career. Mm-hmm. I would say to you, that taught me a very, very important lesson, which is choose a career which calls upon you to do the bits you like. Mm-hmm. And if possible, avoid the parts of the job like math that you don't like. And so I got back to my office and I said to myself, clearly I'm on the wrong career path. I don't like to go shopping. Mm-hmm. I don't particularly enjoy being out on the sales floor. You have to be nice to everybody. That gets very tiring after a while. And so I said to myself, maybe what I ought to do is something that has to do with writing. Mm-hmm. So that was lesson number one.
So how did you then go from that to PR?
In my office, the junior coats and suits department.
I hope you got some discounts before you left.
Yes, but of course my salary was so small I couldn't afford to buy anything. Or virtually nothing. As a matter of fact, to that point, one of the jobs I was offered later on was to be the head of PR for Christie's, the auction house. Mm-hmm. And I was interviewed by I guess he was the president. And it sounded all very interesting because you get to learn about all the different categories that Christie's offers for sale. Until we got to the part about my salary. And I said to him, well, what's the salary for the job? And he told me, and I said, it's really a shame because this would be so much fun to do and I'd really be interested, but I can't afford you. Meaning I couldn't afford to take the job. Anyway. Back to what you were asking.
Well, how you got to PR?
I backed into it. I was not one of these people who knew right away what I wanted to be. Okay. So as I said to you, every time I had a job, I figured out the parts of the job I liked and the parts of the job I didn't like. And apropos of how I got out of retailing toward PR, we had, as I said, a girl who worked part-time and kept the stock books, meaning she tracked inventory. Mm-hmm. And she also worked part-time for Bloomingdale's and part-time for a woman who was the fashion credits editor at Harper's Bazaar, doing some menial job about tracking merchandise that was being photographed. And then she would call it back in from the photographer and return it to the manufacturer. And she said that the fashion credits editor was looking for a replacement, that she had to leave. Mm-hmm. She and her husband were moving to Europe. And would I have any interest in doing that job? I had no idea what a fashion credits editor was, but I figured I didn't have to stand on the sales floor and I didn't have to go shopping. So that seemed pretty good. And I called up. I introduced myself and I asked if I could come meet her, the woman who was leaving Harper's Bazaar. So I went and I met her. She was absolutely charming. And I had an interview with HR and they had nothing available. And I left. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from Harper's Bazaar asking me if I would like to come in and take over Mrs. Bascom's position. This was really pretty good because at that point, I think I was maybe 24 and there were no 24-year-old editors. So and they were prepared to pay exactly what Bloomingdale's was paying.
Okay.
So I said, oh, yes, absolutely. And what it turned out to be was you had to make sure that if the fashion editor said that your earrings were by Bulgari, that the earrings showed in the photograph.
Okay, yeah.
So it was incredible attention to detail. That is priceless because what it means is later on in all the jobs you have, you simply don't make mistakes.
Right.
Or you make very, very few mistakes because you're so trained to look at absolutely everything. I turned into an incredible proofreader. To this day, I can proofread as well as any professional proofreader. And so I did that for a while, checking to make sure that the things that showed on the blue sheets, which was the sheet that was typed up that had it, all the various clothing and accessories that was in the picture, that it really did show. But then I met there the promotion director who was earning 3 times what I was earning, I found out. And her job was writing, only she couldn't write. She didn't like to write. So I said, I'll do it. I mean, that was the part I thought I'd like. Right. And so for no extra money, I was her ghostwriter. Oh. And I did that for about 7 or 8 months. And then I said to myself, what's wrong with this picture? She's being paid 3 times what I'm being paid. I'm doing the lion's share of her work. And I mean, it's fun, but it doesn't keep the lights on.
Right.
So I started looking around for another job. And I wrote a letter to literally every single company I had ever credited on page, whether it was a fabric, Woolmark wool, or an accessory like a Bulgari earring, or a designer's dress. And I got a bunch of interviews and ended up at what was then called is still, I think, called Cotton Incorporated.
Okay.
Which is a trade organization funded by the cotton farmers, whose reason for being is to promote cotton in every single one of its end uses. So whether it's career apparel or interior design fabric or clothing.
Or Q-tips.
Or Q-tips. No, that's really important. But the reason that job was so important, albeit very boring, was because it taught me that you can take the same old tired product and promote it in 50 different ways. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, I think that's PR. Yeah. That's really fun because I can figure out all these different uses for this same old product. Yeah. And that's how I backed into PR.
Huh. Wow. I like that story.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're very good at having these incremental epiphanies. Where, the light bulb goes off and you're like, wait a minute.
That's exactly right. I mean, really, I then got married and my husband was a surgeon who'd got a postgraduate residency in hand surgery. So he was going off to England and I was the trailing spouse. And I said to myself, I got to do something to keep busy. We don't have children. We don't have a dog. We don't even have a cat. Got to do something. So I sat down and I decided not only was I going to get a job in England, but I was going to work for an American firm because they paid 3 times as much. At this point, I had become very sensitive to how much things were, paying because I was totally self-supporting. So I wrote 110, I typed. Remember, this is 1905 now. Yeah. I typed.
It's not really 1905.
We have to correct that timeline.
All right. Not quite, but it was the 80s.
Okay.
And so I typed a letter to every single company that had American company that had an office in London on the theory that I'd get a job at an American wage. And one of the companies I wrote to, which wrote back, was Hearst, because remember, I had been the fashion credits editor of Harper's Bazaar, which is owned by Hearst. And I went in to see the editor-in-chief, who said to me, you know, you've got some nice things on your resume. And Harrods, the big department store, is looking for a press officer. I wasn't sure what a press officer was, but if they were looking for one, that was me.
Hopefully it wasn't ironing pants and
Right, exactly.
or trousers.
I thought about that. She said, I'll call the managing director's office and see if we can't get you an interview. Bless her. So 2 weeks go by. I've now gone through, I think, of the 110 letters I wrote. By the way, I got back 111 responses. The Brits are marvelous about responding to letters. They really are. But unfortunately, only 3 of the companies invited me in because nobody really needed me. And beyond that, you cannot get a work permit in England unless you have a job, and you can't get a job unless you have a work permit. This was truly a conundrum.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me because it's fun to break, to go around the rules, but it was obvious it wasn't going to be easy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got a call having run through all my 3 opportunities, and everybody's saying, we don't have anything right now, but we wanted to meet you. We'll call you. And the managing director's office called, would I like to come in and have an interview for the press officer position? Helen Robinson, the managing editor of British Harper's Bazaar, Harper's and Queen, had given him my name. So off I go to Harrods. Now, if any of you have ever seen Harrods, it is the size of Macy's times 2. So to say that I was having trouble finding his office, the only thing I was grateful for, of course, was that the people in the store spoke English after a fashion.
Yes.
They weren't quite sure what I was talking about, but I could understand. Anyway, so I landed in his office, Mr. Midgley. Mr. Midgley was a Scot who, poor guy, he was new on the job, relatively. He'd been on the job for about 7 months. He didn't like the press officer he found when he got there. And the reason he didn't like her was she had no interest whatsoever in meeting the press and publicizing the merchandise, which was what a press officer does. She wanted to give big parties and swan around. I didn't know from big parties and swanning, but I did know how to deal with the press. So he said to me, Mrs. Gordon, do you think you can do this job? Well, of course I couldn't do the job. It was 26 years old. I'd never been to England before. I couldn't find his office. So I, paging your thing about Moxie, said, yes, I thought I could do the job. No problem. He said, what special things would you require? Now, mind you, I'm 26 years old. This is one of the plum jobs in Britain at that time.
A clothing budget?
That's what everybody was asking for. They were asking, he had interviewed, he later told me, 70 women.
Oh my God.
Every single PR person in the British Isles, from Scotland to Wales. And they asked for a clothing budget. That was number 1. A car and driver. That was number 2. They wanted the interest on their mortgage to be paid by the store.
Whoa.
Oh, yes. I didn't know from these things.
Yeah.
I was 26 years old. So, but, I had a lot of get up and go. Yeah. So I said, I would need an electric typewriter. He was a good Scot, and I came cheap.
Yes.
But he later told me that the reason he'd hired me, because obviously for a major British institution, last thing you want is an American from the other side of the pond. He later said that the reason he hired me was because my answer showed him that really all I wanted to do was the job.
Yeah. Right.
So, and it was a joy, an absolute joy. Every single thing I touched turned to gold because all I wanted to do was the job. I wasn't interested in swanning around. Anyway, it was very, very happy. And when I had to resign to return to the United States because my husband got a big position in surgery back in the US, I marched into the managing director. I explained why I had to quit, and I burst into tears. And he said, "My word, woman, get a grip on yourself." More tears. So with trembling hand, he picked up the phone and called his aide de camp, the general manager, and said, "Craddock, come in this instant. Our press officer is somewhat undone." Anyway, it was a joy.
Wow, another good story. I wanted to ask you about goal setting. In the interview that I watched from a number of years ago, you talked about why or how you set goals for clients and you were able to meet them all.
Yes.
And I'm interested on how goal setting translated into your personal life, in your own goal setting for you, and how you go about thinking about what goals are reasonable for your business, for yourself, and just any tips on goal setting. Because sometimes you set them too big and then you end up, like the New Year's resolution diet, and you end up not accomplishing
You've noticed.
No, I haven't. I've done it. But just how do you go about setting goals that are
Attainable,
yeah. Reasonable, relevant, anything?
My answer is very simplistic. It seemed to me that what I wanted to do, what I needed to do, was earn a living wage. To that point, I'm going to back into the answer. Mm-hmm. The punchline is very simplistic. So because I didn't have any family money I could draw upon, and because I wanted a living wage, and because I have very expensive taste, I thought to myself, I know what I should do. Whoever they assign me to as a boss, I will anticipate all his or her needs. Mm-hmm. So I will do my level best to make them look good. Mm-hmm. This hopefully will get them promoted. And when they get promoted, they'll pull me up with them. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the secret of my success, such as it has been. But I remember one day I had a boss who was brilliant. I mean, really smart. He was also absolutely impossible. I mean, seriously impossible. He once called me up to his office, closed the door to the office. And he was rumored to have a really bad temper. He once threw an ashtray at one of the account guys. So he closed the door. He put on his coat jacket. He turned around so that his back was facing me. And he said to me, "Gordon, you have good taste. I just got this back from my tailor. Do these vents lie flat?" I mean, that's what he was like. So one day he calls up. He didn't believe in talking. He believed in shouting whenever he used the telephone. So I answered the phone and he shouted into the phone, "Gordon, come up here." I was so undone that I grabbed a pen, I grabbed a pad, and instead of waiting for the elevator, I ran up 3 flights of stairs. By the time I got to his floor, as you can imagine, I was huffing and puffing. And I staggered down the hall and I walked into his office and I sat down and he said to me, "What kind of job do you think you're doing?" At this point, I've been working for him for a couple of years. Yeah. So I thought for a minute and I said, "Philip, I'd say I was doing a pretty good job." I'd been in England, you see, so I knew that you have to understate everything. Mm-hmm. So he said, "This is your review." I said, oh, well, in that case, I think I'm doing an excellent job. He said, "Actually, I would take it one step further. I would say that you are doing a superb job, and now I want to tell you what your raise is."
Wow.
So again, I puff out my chest like a powder pigeon, and I wait. And he tells me what my raise is. Never forget this. And I looked at him and I said, "Philip, that's my raise?" And he said, quote, "Christ, Janine, you make big bucks for a woman." I didn't. So I said to myself, how the hell am I going to get even without breaking the rules and without alienating this guy? Because remember, I am his direct report. So I got even. Every time I saw my boss, like walking toward me, no matter whom I was talking to at that moment in time, I would say, "Do you know what Phil said to me?" By the time a week and a half had gone by, he was terrified. This was, women were beginning to come into their own. This was now, I suppose, the very late 80s, early 90s. So within a week and a half, I was made the youngest executive vice president in the history of Saatchi, given a car and a raise. And that was the beginning of leveraging Moxie in your job to get what you need and what you deserve.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing, asking for raises and whatnot.
I never did. I just tried, as I said to you before, I tried to anticipate my boss's need, whoever that boss was, just to make sure that they would, or I hoped that they would reward me in turn.
Kindred Property Care is the tri-state area's premier landscape contractor. They are a full-service landscaping company that is dedicated to providing homeowners and commercial accounts with the landscape projects of their dreams. When it comes to stone masonry, landscape development, landscape and gardening maintenance, snow and ice services, or 3D renderings and designs, Kindred Property Care has you covered. To learn more, you can call 860-397-5267 or visit www.kindredpropertycare.com. But this is an issue that women face, is asking or getting compensated for the jobs that they're doing and closing that pay gap.
It hasn't been closed.
Right. So do you have any advice on that? Like how do you know what you're worth? How did you know?
Such a good question.
Like benchmarking research?
Yes, I would say yes. For example, as a PR person, I belong to Public Relations Society of America. So what I used to do, to your point, regularly was read the salary surveys that Public Relations Society put out, so I could see what people at my level were earning, whether they were men or women. I didn't care. I just knew if they were earning X and I was earning X minus X, then I had to earn X.
So your math skills improved over time.
That's very nice.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
It's burning a hole in my pocket. Yeah. Personal branding. Like you became a branding expert in your PR.
Yes.
World. What do you think of personal branding? How do you think about it for yourself? What advice would you have for others for creating a brand that's authentic and positive and conveys the messages that they want to convey?
Such a good question. I actually am a lot less extroverted than the two of you think. Or may think.
And our audience.
And your audience. Part of the reason that I liked PR so much, aside from the ability to write and to creatively merchandise a product, is because a really good PR person is behind the scenes, which is to say we're pulling the strings, and that's fun. I mean, it's very gratifying to write the speech for somebody famous and watch them deliver your words. I like that enormously, but that's much different than delivering the speech yourself.
Right.
So I would say to you that what I did was whatever organization I worked for or my own, because in the end I opened my own PR firm, I very carefully defined its brand so that although I was the president, basically in all cases, I started as a president very young. The brand was more emblematic of the organization I was leading rather than me per se. I mean, my personality, such as it is, was all over the brand, but it was more about the brand than about me. I got invited to give a number of speeches and to give lots of interviews, but I didn't set out to get myself personal publicity ever, or give talks and,
Yeah, but today I work in career education, and a big topic is cultivating and curating your personal brand for your LinkedIn profile, for your resume, for your portfolio. And I just didn't know if you had any advice for someone trying to figure out how to present themselves. Like, what kind of image did you want to portray as a professional, as an individual? And how did you kind of make that manifest?
No, that's a wonderful question. I used the company or the division I was running to embody those values. So, for example, I believed that since we were in the end, I ran a PR firm, which I established and sold. And I decided that our PR firm, because it was small, I only had 12 people plus me, that we had to stand for something which would be totally consistent with my personality, to your point. So I said the very first thing we have to do is fabulous work. I need to be known as somebody who is highly creative and has incredible attention to detail and cares about the client's product as much as the client. We did become known for that. The other thing, and as a result, got some incredible clients. I mean, we represented Mayo Clinic, we represented the Weizmann Institute of Science, Shiseido, Time Inc., Cargo Cosmetics. I mean, all the really premier, Johnson & Johnson. And the other thing we would do in a new business pitch is we would make sure that the pitch was fun. Now, I know this sounds probably a little odd because why are you having fun when you're competing for their business? But it really was fun. We treated the prospect as though they were somebody that we liked and would like to know as a friend. And I remember we were competing for the Capital Grille, that business. The brief was to open 50 restaurants across the country for the Capital Grille. Big piece of business. And we were competing against two very fine, significantly larger PR firms. And the chemistry was marvelous with the two prospects, two ladies, the head of sales and the head of marketing. And we had a marvelous time with our pitch. We really had a lot of fun. And they left. And about an hour later, I got a call from the more senior of the two ladies who said, Janine, we have to come back and see you again. We have a couple of questions. And I thought, oh my God, we've just done this. You know, your adrenaline shoots up and then of course it levels down. Yeah. And I thought, I don't know if I can gin myself back up again. But you can't say, no, you can't come in. Yeah. So I said, we can hardly wait to see you. Anyway, they show up about 20 minutes later and march in with a bottle of champagne. And I look at the champagne and they said, we just want to present this to the president of our new PR firm. And it was the classiest. And in fact, we worked for them for 12 years. And they remained exactly like that same classy enthusiasm and creativity. But I said to them, why did you decide to pick us? That's a much more important question than why didn't you pick us? Because many times you won't get picked because of something that is ineffable. So they said, well, we picked you because, as we all know, in marketing and PR, you have to work very, very hard to anticipate the competition, be more creative and more strategic. But we had such fun. We said to ourselves, well, if we got to work this hard, at least we'll laugh our way to success. And I mean, we're laughing now. Yeah. I think that's very important because otherwise things get a little boring and you're not quite as creative as you can be. I also think that chemistry is critical. You know, you meet some people and you like them instantly. There are other people you meet and you say to yourself, they're very nice, but oh no. And so if the chemistry is good and if you really listen to what they have to say, much more important to get them talking in a new business pitch than for you to monopolize the conversation.
So can I ask you, I've known you since I was, 11 or 12?
Yes.
And what did you think? Now,
when I met you, that I couldn't believe you had natural blonde hair and bright blue eyes. That's what I thought.
No, not about me. So, Mary, Janine was our PR person for the Icelandic horse, for our farm.
That's how we met.
And that's how we met. So, being a kid, I don't remember all the details. What was your thought when you were approached to help promote the Icelandic horse?
I thought, this is great because it's a blank slate in this country. as prestigious as that breed may be in European countries and in Iceland, most people have never heard of it. And beyond that, a lot of people are, have this fixation on if it's not tall, it's not good. Yeah. And the Icelandic horse, God bless it, is probably only about 2 or 3 inches taller than a pony, which is great because it means it's like skiing with skis that aren't too long. Mm-hmm. I mean, the gaits are brilliant. So I thought, this is great. I don't have to undo all kinds of things. Right. Sometimes you inherit a brand, and whoever the previous marketing firm was has really done a not marvelous job. So you have to undo a lot of the preconceptions. So this was an empty slate. Yeah. And then, of course, we had a very brilliant trainer, your father, who, looks like Captain Video. I mean, my God, he's as attractive as the horses are fabulous. So it was an absolutely perfect opportunity to take a guy who looks like central casting for the Icelandic horse. And, it's true. I mean, well,
and little Thorin romping in the background.
I wasn't so little, but,
She's always been tall. Actually, you probably know this, but the Icelandic women are considered the most beautiful women in the world.
I did know that.
So
just from my sample of 1.
I was going to say, based upon my sample of 2, Thorne and her mother, I would agree with that.
Yes.
But what you probably don't know, Mary, maybe a lot of our readers is that, or readers, I'm thinking of the magazine, our listeners, is that the Icelandic horse was a complete unknown entity. It had, really? I think it was in 1987 where they were shown in Madison Square Garden. I think that was the only, first big thing. And then when we came around in the early 90s, I mean, Janine is responsible for putting my dad and the horse on the cover of, on the cover of Forbes, Town and Country. She got them programming on CNN, CNBC, A&E, Discovery Channel. I mean, Discovery Channel did a half hour or an hour segment with them.
I don't remember.
Yeah, but and it was funny. I don't know if you know this. A family friend of ours, he was working in India. This was after the Discovery Channel show. He called up my grandpa. It's like, hey, I just saw your son-in-law here on Indian TV.
Oh, my God.
Because the program was aired. Yes, it was aired in India. So she is single-handedly responsible for the success of a lot of the success of the horse in the 90s and into today. So Janine, I think, we should take our hats off for her work and, for everyone now that knows the Icelandic horse, because just about anyone in America knows what the Icelandic horse is now. I mean, there were other people who kind of took the reins from us, no pun intended.
No pun, right.
Afterwards, and kind of younger people and other people who took it in a different direction. And like now with the big horse shows, like at the Big E in Springfield, Massachusetts every year, the biggest draw for the night shows is the Icelandic horse.
Exactly.
In the 90s, everyone was like, what, that little pony? And I remember, so many conversations at our kitchen table. One of the challenges that you had was always the American mantra of the bigger, the better. Right. This was not that. Right. So I was just curious to see, what your thoughts had initially been and then how you guys rolled with it and just, people started embracing it because the work that you guys did for, well over 10 years and really doing work on it.
It was great. It was one of the most fun, most creative assignments I've ever had because we started from ground zero, but we had a fabulous product. That's the key. Yeah. In terms of a PR professional, I think the most important thing, above and beyond everything else, is never, ever agree to work for a product you don't believe in. Because how can you sell it?
Right.
At the end of the day, a PR person is really just a salesman, a very creative one, but a salesman.
You focused on luxury brands.
Expensive taste. Yes.
Expensive taste.
Science and science and not-for-profits.
So I'm interested in the dichotomy between the expensive taste and the nonprofit sector.
That's a very good question again.
Is PR a recipe or a template that you lift up and whatever brand it is, you follow the same type of method, and whether it's expensive taste or nonprofit, or how did you create some synergies? Like I was listening that you created a synergy between the Guggenheim and Capital Grille.
Right.
Was that kind of your MO, or how did you kind of navigate talking to expensive taste in the morning and a nonprofit in the afternoon?
Most people, to your point, don't realize that it is people with money, basically, who are fueling the not-for-profits. That's where the overlay comes between the not-for-profit and high-end products. I think that what you have to do is appeal to a high-end audience when you are promoting not-for-profits, because at the end of the day, the objective of any PR campaign for a not-for-profit is raising money for them so that they can continue to function. That's the synergy between the two.
Right.
And so you have to figure out, as a PR person, what can you do to reach a very upscale audience when you are promoting a not-for-profit.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I was just interested in the mindset or the caps that you would have to wear when talking to one director versus another. But I see how they twine together.
But taking that one step further, I live, as you both know, in Miami for half the year. And when my husband and I got to Miami, we realized we only knew two couples. Mm-hmm. And I think, as we would all agree, the people you know add to the richness and the texture of your experience in any place. Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, we got to meet some people.
Can't look at you all day.
Right. And so I thought, I know what I'll do. By this time I had sold my PR firm. Mm-hmm. So I thought, number one, it would be nice of me to give back because I had been reasonably successful. And number two, I have a marketable skill. Mm-hmm. I am a professional marketing PR development person, meaning fundraising person. So why don't I pick out the 4 charities, big ones, based in Miami that are of personal interest to me, go meet with them, and tell them who I am, introduce myself, and offer to work for them. This also is emblematic of Moxie, because I decided I wasn't going to go meet the head of PR, and I wasn't going to go meet the president necessarily, who would be interested in meeting me because they might think I was, a potential donor. I was going to meet the chairman of the board of directors. So I was able to organize interviews for myself with the 4 chairmen of the board of trustees or directors. And I introduced myself. I told them who I was. I said what I was capable of doing. And I said I'd like to work for them. And of course, each one of them said, that would be great, but we can't afford you. And I said, oh, yes, you can. It's totally free. And beyond that, I'll become a donor. So of the 4, I approached the Miami City Ballet, which is a world-class ballet company now, the Perez Art Museum of Miami, big, wonderful museum, the New World Symphony, again, a fabulous organization, and Baptist Health of South Florida. Of those 4, 2 of them took me very seriously, to the point that I'm now a trustee of the ballet. So the reason I bring this up is because there I am really working, 20 hours a week for each one of them. And I said to myself, I know what I should do. They both have very important groups of donors. And although there may be some overlap, it's certainly not going to be 100%. I'm going to figure out which of these 4, and by this point, it had really been winnowed down to the ballet and Baptist Health. I was doing the odd job for the other 2, but it really was more like the odd job. How am I going to introduce one of these organizations to another and get them to partner? Because I'm sure that because they have overlapping donors, if I can work out a successful partnership between, say, Miami City Ballet and Baptist Health, I'll betcha we can make the donors of one continue to donate to that organization, but also donate to the other. And so I put Miami City Ballet and Baptist Health together. And I said, okay, it would be worth something to Baptist Health to be named the official healthcare provider to Miami City Ballet. Because if you think about it, what are ballet dancers? They are world-class athletes. Right. And they're always injuring something.
Right.
So if Baptist can be known as such a fine organization that it keeps those dancers literally on their feet, that's a very good thing. And in turn, I will get Baptist to pay, both in kind and in dollars, services and money to Miami City Ballet. So they'll pay them X number of dollars for the right to refer to themselves as the official healthcare provider of. And I'll also get them to do things like monitor people for COVID if they're going in for a performance. This was back when COVID really was in its highest level. And I will get them to, I'll promote their physical therapy, their orthopedic surgery, anything which would in any way relate to the product of Miami City Ballet. Anyway, it's been hugely successful for both brands. They're both world-class brands. It's so successful, in fact, that the annual gala that Miami City Ballet gives every year to raise money went from earning $800,000 in donations and ticket sales to almost $2 million this past year. And that, I think, is in large measure a function of the fact that the two organizations were intimately intertwined. Yes. And I was sitting not at Miami City Ballet's table, but one of the Baptist Health tables.
Right. Wow. That's a great connection story. Right. And how I think it's indicative of how your brain works. Just that you see connections or possible connections. Unfortunately, we are at that time where we ask the final question. Yes, we've run out of time. Thorin, let her have it.
If you had any advice to give, no matter how big or small, Mary likes to call it
moving the Moxie needle.
Yes. What would you say to people? And we always reiterate, it can be very small, just one step, or it could be huge, life-changing, or anything in between. If you would have any advice to give from your own experience or in your own life, what would you give to tell people?
I would say pick a career that calls upon you to do all the things you love. Because as we all know, if you're enjoying yourself, you're going to do a great job.
Yeah.
And so I would say find something that you really enjoy, because it won't even feel like work. And then you will continue to progress right up the ladder.
I think we do that, right?
I think we do.
Yeah.
Well, considering your products, I would say you absolutely do.
So, and we're open to any partnerships you come up with. But Janine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, this has been fun.
Moxie. It's been a lot of fun.
And I learned more about you that I haven't known in the last 30 years.
Well, that's very funny, but it's true.
So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you both. This was really great.
So Mary, what do you think of Janine?
Wow. I felt like she had so many great Moxie lessons. And the one that just leapt out at me was her inherent Moxie from when she was having that college interview. And that she had the seed of Moxie, and that throughout her life, she was able to work that muscle and develop it and cultivate it into something much stronger, and that served her in so many ways in her career and her personal life.
Yeah. And I loved your question of personal branding and how she both defined that and then used it herself. And, I thought that was such a great question that you posed.
Well, personal branding is such a big topic these days
definitely.
In job searches and in life and with social media, that you really have to be aware of it. And she seemed to have a very strong one. I love how she created the partnership between the Miami Ballet and Baptist Health to create a whole that was greater than the sum of the parts. Truly synergy.
Yes.
Benefiting both parties and the people that they serve.
For sure.
So and she just seems to be always looking how she can connect people.
She is for sure a person connector. And, from the time that I knew her, and just how she thought about things. And she was always like, oh, I have to talk to so-and-so. I have to connect so-and-so. Even as I was telling you earlier, even when I was about to graduate college, she's like, when you're ready, I want you to meet people. But that's just who she is. And I think that her way of thinking and thinking a little differently, using those, as you said, those ways that she, her Moxie, if you will, and just doing something a little differently and going after and being unafraid to go after it and writing 110 letters because she could.
Yep. And then being generous of spirit to share the rewards of her Moxie with others.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, great catch, and really happy we got to talk to her.
It was, as I said, I've known her for such a long time, but I didn't know her early story. So for me to hear that and connect it with, when I met her in the early 90s. So to hear the 10, 15 years prior and how she got to that point was, really fun as well. And learn, I just love learning about people, especially ones you think you know.
Right.
And to hear how, what happened to bring them to the point where you got to know them. And so it kind of makes you look at them a little differently and, tip your hat to them and the things that they decided to do, that they took the courage to do and to bring them to the point they are today. And so I was really excited to have her, but excited for you to meet her too and to hear her entire story.
Well, it was a great one. So thank you. And
I'll see you next time.
This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Elise Sarney Real Estate and Kindred Property Care.